Good morning.
Morning, Commissioner. Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good morning. And thank you, Carolina.
All
Chair,
right.
the sun is so beautiful.
Oh, see, there's no sun here. It's pretty cloudy and rainy in McMinnville. There's our county council. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. And Carolina Rook, thank you very much for getting us online. So at this time, we'll call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for October 28th, 2021. And Christian, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Of course. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. We have additions to our joint calendar session. Commissioners, anything else to add?
Checking chair right now. I don't see anything except for that I will be at the McMinnville Chamber dinner next Thursday evening. So since we'll be meeting before then,
Okay.
in case you are.
Yeah, I think we may have noticed that one.
Yeah.
But Thursday night, the 4th, is also the Farm Bureau dinner, so I will be at that. Just in
And
case.
I will as well. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we can move on. We have received Ken.
I'm sorry, commissioners. I was making notes about the joint calendar. I had one more request. I know last week we were looking and we scheduled out our work session calendar, basically through the end of the calendar year. The sheriff reached out and he was hoping to schedule that the board would be open to scheduling a work session on December 2nd. And this is to receive a presentation and a discussion about the radio system survey that the sheriff's office has been working on. And we don't have a work session scheduled for that day. So I just wanted to see if the board would be okay with putting that on the schedule.
December 2nd.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good to me, Chair.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll get the work session calendar updated and I'll let the sheriff know.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have received public comments, and one was related to the agenda, which we can address during that item. The others is a former Commissioner Dennis Gex has asked us to put something on our board meeting agenda as public input and for discussion, and we can address that for next week. But at this time, we've had a request to move our public hearing item J up to before the work session. So we'll go ahead and, if that's all right, board, go ahead.
Chair.
And that is item J1, which is the George Fox University and the Revenue Bond Series. And the so that hearing will be now. We'll go ahead and open that public hearing. And at this time, it is item J1, receipt of public comment on a request from George Fox University to issue Revenue Bond Series 2021 in a maximum aggregate principal not to exceed the amount of $48 million for the purpose of refinancing prior debt obligations and financing additional projects. And it is item A, consideration of approval in the matter of an order authorizing the issuance, sale, execution, and delivery of revenue and refunding bonds, George Fox University project, in an aggregate amount not exceeding $48 million, and approving an intergovernmental agreement. So, Christian, if you would bring us up to speed, we have a couple of things we need to address during this, and want to see if there's any public comment in relation to this.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board, for agreeing to move this item on the agenda. Joining us on the Zoom call, as you can see, are Mike Schrader from the county's bond counsel, and then we have Vicki Pearsall from George Fox and John Bridges for George Fox. The first item in this that we need to consider is to open the TEFRA hearing, and then we'll toss it quickly to Mike to see if we have any comments for the TEFRA hearing. And then Mike, I'm not sure what else you or George Fox might want or need to say during that hearing. But if we start there, and then after the hearing is completed and closed, then we can move on to the second item, which would be the board's consideration of the order.
Okay, so we've opened the hearing. So Mr. Schrader, if you wanted to go ahead.
Certainly. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Ken and Christian, for your assistance in setting this up today. This hearing is required by the Internal Revenue Code as a condition to the issuance of tax-exempt bonds by the county for the benefit of George Fox University. I have dialed into a separate 800 number. IRS has created special rules that allow these hearings to be conducted virtually, provided you have an 800 number. So I'm dialed into an 800 number and I do not have any other participants on the call currently.
Okay, thank you for that. So there are a couple of other things, and that is the bonds itself. And perhaps, are we going to be talking about the rate that we're going to consider at this point, Christian?
I think, Madam Chair, you are referring to the issuance fee.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's not something that would need to be discussed now. We can have that conversation when we're discussing approval of the order.
Okay. All righty.
I guess at this point, Mike, we would ask if there's any other folks out there who would like to provide any comment as part of the TEFRA hearing.
Correct, and I'll just ask if there's anyone on the 800 number. And there are none.
Okay. All right. So that was the public comment period. At this point, we'll move on to the consideration of approval of authorizing the issuance, sale, execution, and delivery
I think at this point, we can go ahead and close the hearing
of the bonds. So the hearing is closed, and now we'll move into the consideration and discussion.
Yeah, I think this might be appropriate to hear at this point from the representative from George Fox to provide the board with a little bit of additional background, and Mike, feel free to chime in as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pearsall, thank you for being with us.
Hi, Commissioners. John Bridges here. I represent the university, and as you heard, Vicki Pearsall is here as well. Vicki is the CFO at the university and has been doing a great job at that position for a number of years now. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the bonds and some projects that it's going to help us fund. And then I'm going to turn it over for a little bit of a financial picture from Ms. Pearsall, and then we'll open it up to any questions you might have. This is actually a public bond, which the university's had several bonds in the past, but they've always been private placement bonds. So this one's had a bit of extra work, and it's actually, I think, both beneficial to the university and frankly beneficial to the public because it provides a good bond out in the marketplace. We were recently rated by S&P and received an A- rating, which is a great rating for a university not-for-profit organization. And so we're really excited about that. The bond essentially will refinance some prior bonding and pay off some complicated financial documents, which are called swaps, They're a tool that you use to kind of guard against inflation if you have an adjustable rate bond. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all of these prior bonds, put it all into one bond, get rid of these swap instruments, and then we'll be in, I think, some great shape to move forward. We have 4 main projects that I just briefly want to talk to you about. We have an art annex, which has been in the master plan for a number of years. The plan is to actually demolish 2 buildings that are quite old, but not historically significant, and try to bring together the art programs. And it's going to be connected to something called the Makers Hub. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a science business hub that tries to connect innovation with commercial application. And now we're trying to bring the art department into that same space so that they could be part of that kind of cooperative, collaborative process. We hope to have that project built out by July of 2023. That's about a $3.5 million project. The second piece, kind of along the same sorts of lines, is one of those buildings that's being demolished is all of the studio space that all of the art students have, and frankly, also the art professors. And so we're remodeling part of the Lemons Academic Building to replace that studio space. And that's about a $400,000 project, and it should be done by August of next year. A big kind of improvement project, I won't say it's COVID related, but I'll just say it's advancement related, is the Ross Academic Building. You know, so many of the buildings on George Fox's campus were built for one purpose and now are used for another purpose. That Ross Academic Building was originally a gymnasium. So as you can imagine, it was a big open space, and then they started breaking it up into smaller spaces. So that project is $1 million project to upgrade the HVAC system and to build out 2 classrooms in that space. George Fox University has the pleasure of having enrollment growth, which is great for universities of their size. And so those classrooms will be to serve some of that enrollment growth. The last big project out of the bond is going to be working on the Minthorn House. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but that's the oldest building on our campus. It's actually older than the campus itself, which is pretty astounding. It was actually where Herbert Hoover lived and played as a boy in Newburgh. And so we're going to renovate that. That is a building that's on the National Historic Registry. And so, as you can imagine, it takes a lot more care in renovating that. We're going to have a project that is about, what was it? I think it was like 3.5 million. And it will be to renovate that building. And that building is going to be pretty exclusively used for the university's honors program. So we'll bring that honors program that's in different little spaces all into one space, so that both the scientific and the liberal arts and the arts and all the programs can be joined together. And so that's kind of a synopsis of the new projects. I'll hand it over to Ms. Pearsall for the kind of a little synopsis of the finances and enrollment at the university, so you can kind of see the path that we're on.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. But so our university, as you know, is a faith-based organization. And like all universities during the pandemic, we felt a downturn as well. So like we normally expect new students around 600 each year, and it was around 480. So it had an effect on the university, but the university itself has always been fiscally conservative. So we were able to weather the pandemic without doing layoffs, without doing any draconian efforts like taking people's retirement away. So everybody maintained their jobs, even though they were remote. This year, we have like a record enrollment. So our undergraduate is around 2,300 students. and our graduates at over 2,000 students. So at this point, we're around 43,000 or 4,300 students in total, which is the largest private university in Oregon at this point. Part of our growth is really because we invest in the future. So we have been really focused on what jobs are needed in our various communities as well as rural areas. And so we have implemented a growth projections for the behavioral health. So we implemented integrated primary care on our institution and within our educational programs, which actually took off. It took off much better than we thought. So we doubled enrollment there. And then we put in a physician's assistance program, which, I mean, it was affected by COVID, but because students couldn't travel and so on, but it is back up to what we anticipated, and it's going to continue to grow for the next 2 years. And we're also starting a master's of occupational therapy, which will happen in 2024. So our goal has always been to invest and provide value for our students while maintaining a very fiscally conservative approach. We don't have like this really large endowment, so we're not really leaning on that. We're really trying to make sure that we generate enough income to actually reinvest into our faculty and our students' education. At the same time, we focused on being more affordable for our students. So this year we froze tuition, so we didn't increase tuition at all. And then we've also done like special projects, like trying to look at our overall student base and then focus on how do we get more scholarship across the entire group versus like focusing in on just smaller groups. So we've given more scholarship this last year than we have in prior years. So I think in general, the university, when we're talking about these projects and that we're putting, it isn't a one-time, like we just decided to do it. We do master planning. So we have like a 25-year master plan for the university that we consistently update based on the needs of our community. So in essence, we are always looking to see what jobs students can fill after they finish their degree, and does that require us to change our facilities to give them top of the line education. So like this year, we also implemented anatomy and physiology in a virtual method so that they have goggles, like they have the VR goggles, and so that they're using high technology, because when they leave and they go into their groups, their new jobs, they're going to need to know those skills and they need to be familiar with those skills. I think that's all.
Yeah, we're happy to ask any questions. And I think Commissioner Snarrett did reference a letter that I sent. We feel like George Fox University adds a lot of value to the county. We provide hundreds of family wage jobs. Oftentimes, both spouses are working at the university, so we may be the sole source of income for that family. We're also, I think, pretty innovative because, one thing we're doing is we're looking at trying to develop 10 acres that we own with a developer and be able to retain some of those home sites so we can have middle income housing for our own staff and professors. So we're recognizing that we don't need the community to provide for us, but we can be innovative on how we might provide for ourselves. And so that, historically, the county has been kind enough to give us a reduction of about 50% in the issuance fee. We'd love it if that happened again. And I can assure you that will be redoubled as an effort back into our communities.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms.
The only other thing I would add to that, so it is true that we are working on trying to create 10 acres into attainable homes. We're also working with the community to develop child care centers, because we've been identified as a desert here in Newburgh. And it's like, okay, well, we have to respond to that. And then if we can, align it to our College of Education program so that It's not just you're dropping your child off, you're dropping off your child and they're going to learn no matter what age they are in the facility. So that's actually, we're working on a feasibility study for that as well.
Yeah, it's a great, I love how they kind of think, how can this benefit several factors? Because that way their early childhood education students can have practical experience right away and throughout their college experience by having that childcare center. So it's like a win-win situation. Hopefully that feasibility study proves.
I know. We're hoping to. We're madly working on it.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Thank you, Ms. Pearsall. A couple of things that came to mind. First of all, don't break my heart on the Minthorn House. You're not going to renovate it to the point where the artifacts and historical significance and all that, that is one of my favorite places.
No. Actually, we're restoring it to its original look.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it looks pretty original right now.
I was going to say, you're making the chair nervous.
You said $3.5 million to renovate it. I thought, well, I hope it doesn't wind up looking like a glass contemporary building.
No. It goes back to, it's like, so right, they added that staircase. We're going back and they took off the dormers from the ceilings.
Yeah.
So we're putting those dormers back in the ceilings, and then we're putting the staircase where it should be. But we have to create ADA, and that's where the majority of the money is going. So we have to attach off to the right-hand side, like a side building that has an elevator that takes you up and down. So that's like it's odd, but that's the majority of the cost. And then the interiors will be refreshed.
Okay, good to know.
One last piece on that, Chair, is that a person in the library, the head of the library at the university, she is a historian, and part of her job, I don't know, it's like 10 or 15 hours a week, is to work on historical projects in the city of Newburgh. So not only is she trying to make sure things like the Minthorn House are true to their historical perspective, but she's helping places like Chapters when they do a remodel to return it to its historical look. And I think that's great that the university is willing to share that resource with the whole community.
Thank you. A couple of things. First, I want to say thank you, Ms. Pearsall, because our partnership at the county with George Fox has been really helpful for our community and crisis intervention. And so we appreciate that. And I appreciate the behavioral health emphasis, because it's been identified statewide that, and it's certainly in this county, that behavioral health employees are hard to come by. So we hope that they'll study here and stay here. So commissioners, any questions?
No, Chair. I think they did a great presentation. I'm prepared for this and familiar with it.
And I did have a question, Christian, about the fee. I know that what we've done in the past for other bonding requests, if we would be consistent with that.
Yeah, I went back and I looked at some of the fees that have been charged recently, and then I went back and looked at the issuance fees for the George Fox bonds from 2012, and unless I'm reading it incorrectly, it looks like the board has historically given about a 10% discount, and that would be consistent with a recent fee reduction, or a reduction in the total issuance fee that similar. It's not exactly the same, but it would be approximately the same as was recently considered for Linfield. So I think a 10% reduction would be both consistent with what we've done historically and consistent with what we've done with another private university in the county within the last 12 months.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
But it is up to the board. The board can choose to reduce the fee in a greater amount if they're so inclined. And the rate, just so as a reminder, Mike and I have talked about this before, the county's current issuance fee rate is 90 cents per thousand of the financing. So this is no more than a $48 million issuance. So 90 cents per thousand would be an issuance fee somewhere in the range of $43,000. So then whatever reduction the board chose to to take would come off of that. This is also below sort of the unofficial threshold that we set when we recently did financing for Friendsview. You'll recall that was for, Mike, correct me, I think that was like 150 million. So the issuance fee there, if we had followed our standard practice, would have been well above $100,000. So we sort of agreed that the issuance fees generally, unless there were special circumstances, would be capped at no more than $50,000. So this amount with the reduction would also still fall below that $50,000 threshold.
Thank you, Christian. I hesitate to deviate from what we did with Linfield in that you don't want to ever be accused of playing favorites, and I don't want any of that to come back. So that 10%.
I'll take another look at that. It's possible that the discount we gave Linfield was slightly more than 10%, but I'll confirm that. And if that's sort of the consensus of the board, we'll use that as a benchmark for now.
Yeah, that would be good clarification. Yes, Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So just for sake of conversation, where does this money go? I mean, we're talking about maybe 43,000 versus if it's 50%, 20. But where does the money go? What is it used for? And is there expenses that we charge against that for this purpose?
Yeah, really the expenses that the county incurs are the staff time for my office to work with Mike and the borrowers to put the county's portion of the documents and the county's responsibility as it relates to this financing in place. As far as where it goes, Ken, I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head how the money has been divided or allocated before, but that's, if we can't pull that information up right now, we can probably provide that to the board at a later time.
I don't have it right in front of me, but typically it, like Christian was describing, we split up those funds between administration and county council, with county council's office getting, because it's county council's office, it's as far as staff time goes, is spends more time on this than admin does. So again, Christian and I will sit down and we usually look at how much time was put in this, and then we make sure that the funds received are split up between the various funds appropriately.
Thank you. That would be good to know. I think maybe going forward, if we wanted to at some point have it as an agenda item to clarify, so that we're not, we want to charge something that's appropriate so that we're covering staff time, but we certainly don't want to make a profit on it. And so, yeah, in terms of community benefit, if we could look at that going forward. But I think right now I would say we're pretty much tied to what the consideration was given to Linfield. And maybe we can, Christian, you can share that with Mr. Bridges so that you'll have a hard and fast number, and the board can just make a decision today based on what that rate was.
Well,
Sure, I agree with that.
Sorry, Mr. Kula. I was just going to say, Mike and I have talked about this before, and Mike, unless something has changed, I think that the rates that we're charging are consistent with rates that other counties and other governmental entities are using for similar types of financings. Mike, does that still hold true?
Yeah, Christian and commissioners, that's absolutely the case. In fact, you're on the lower end of what issuers. I mean, there's a variety of local issuers across the state who issue for these conduit bonding programs on that. So, just want to note on the resolution, we do have the 90 cents per thousand fee is built into the resolution as presented. So I think for the commissioners, if you're comfortable proceeding with that, or we can always amend and say, or such other amount as may be negotiated between the county and the university, if you want to defer on this and have further conversations on this. So I just want to note that it's hardwired into the document that's presented to you currently. So if you want to reserve on that, we can certainly take that edit, if you would.
Yeah,
So
it says a fee of 90 cents per thousand, but not less than 10,000. So I sort of read that as giving the county already some flexibility to determine exactly what the final issuance fee would be. But if we need to make a specific amendment now or later to that, Mike, yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you and Commissioner Kula that we need parity in terms of what we did with Linfield. But I also think that going forward, the scale is important, because if for Friendsview, we had a $150 million bond and we capped it at 50,000. I mean, obviously the scale is not quite the same for George Fox. So, you know, perhaps that's a discussion for the future, but I do think that's important to consider as well.
Thank you. Good point. Okay. So if there's no other discussion, we can go ahead and consider approving the authorization of the issuance, sale, and execution of the refunding bonds.
Chair, I would move approval of that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item J1A. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. So at this time, Christian, you'll be working with Mr. Bridges, Mr. Schrader, and Ms. Pearsall on the specifics, and going forward, maybe we can have further discussions on the rate.
Yeah, we will do that. And Mike or John or Vicky, I'm not sure, is there an update as to when we expect this to close?
I can kind of give you an update. We just came out of a team meeting. This is a public offering, so it gets priced and placed. And that pricing and placement will occur in November, and we have a December 1st closing date.
Okay. So yeah, we will continue to work with Bond Counsel and George Fox and the rest of the army of folks that are part of this transaction towards that closing date.
Thank you. Well,
Great. Thank you for your support.
thank you
And
all.
thank you for agreeing to move this up on the agenda. I know this frees the rest of the folks on the calls day. So thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Okay, thanks so much. So we'll move on to our next item, which is going back to item E, which is the work session. And we're going to be discussing the Arpa water and sewer infrastructure grants. And I want to thank Ken Huffer for working on this. So if you wanted to give us sort of the base coat of what you have so far.
Yeah, so where we're at, we had this work session scheduled based on feedback that we've received in previous work sessions on how to prioritize and focus the ARPA funds, and the first one, and kudos to Carrie Martin, who did a lion's share of the work on preparing the packet that's provided. What we have is a grant proposal for the water and sewer infrastructure portion of the ARPA funds. And, you know, and Carrie has joined us to also answer any questions that come up, but it's in your packet. And, you know, I will say we put together a pretty ambitious timeline, you know, as far as the, you know, if the board approves proceeding with this competitive grant program, that we would launch and open for applications next week or the week after next. And then ideally, we're going to be looking at reviewing applications and then having award recommendations in December, and then looking at dispersing the funds for the awarded projects at the beginning of next calendar year. And so there's a timeline that was provided. There's also an outreach strategy for making sure that we get the information out. Realizing this one's a little bit different because, you know, unlike nonprofits or some of the other program areas that are more general in nature on the announcements, this is, you know, really going to be targeted towards, you know, municipalities or districts or those that operate water and sewer systems. So, but we still have a really good outreach plan that's also part of this. And again, you know, this is looking at, and we provide an overview also in the packet of the prioritization and what portion of the funds of the ARPA allocation and how that's going to be divided up. So again, this is for just over 6.8 million of our ARPA allocation towards water and sewer infrastructure. And really the application and everything that was put together was to make sure that we could solicit, enough information to, one, ensure that we're still in compliance with the Treasury guidelines around the use of the ARPA funds, and then also get enough information to where an informed recommendation, and decision can be made that, as far as depending on the number of applications and the amounts requested, we're anticipating this could be competitive and could be some challenges around that and determining, where the funds are going to go to, because I do realize that almost every jurisdiction and water district, based on the initial information that we received early in the process, all have, some pretty substantial needs and projects identified. So, Carrie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Only that on the first page, that the dates that reflect 10/25 would be today. So we would push those a little bit and start after the approval.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Kula, I know you've been sort of boots on the ground on the water and sewer and infrastructure. Do we, taking a look at this, taking a look at the timeline, and in your communications with the different jurisdictions, does this seem like something that everybody would be able to do in this timeline?
I would say, Chair, that, thank you for that. First, this looks really good to me based upon what the community's needs are, meshing it with the eligibility and criteria of the American Rescue Plan money. I think it does all that really well. I will say that in communications with cities, they are very happy to hear this tight timeline, which is for us, this is a staffing challenge, but for them, they're really, I spoke with folks at the city of Yamhill last night because I had this draft with me when I was at their water town hall, and they were very happy to see that time frame, because a lot of the cities are hoping that they will be able to do work that includes this funding, provided they get it funded from us in this next construction season. And so this will really help with that. So from what I understand and what I hear from folks, their master plan projects, they're already ready to go, the ones that they've identified that they're going to submit for. So thank you for asking.
And a lot of them had submitted some of the preliminary planning to us. As soon as word was on the street that we had ARPA funds, they were firing them off. So I know that they are in some manner of along the way in completion. So thank you for that. Carrie, thank you for putting this together for us.
And if I'm sorry, Chair, and if I could just quickly add, because I think another important component to just kind of call out is we are looking at 3 different grant categories that have 3 different levels of funding, for the requests. The first one is the planning and assessment projects, and that's up to 200,000 per project. So again, there might be questions in that application because, if they're applying to get engineering, master planning, wherever they're at in the process, there's that category. Then and Carrie and I talk about this all the time because I get confused the difference between a capital purchase and an implementation project. And it's really to kind of recognize, like a capital purchase may be like a software system, a piece of equipment that, a pump or something specific that's a capital expense or something that they need for the system. And an implementation project is also a capital project, but that's more of the larger scale projects that may include other elements like the planning and engineering and implementation as well. So that's why there's the 3 tiers or the 3 layers of programs, just based on that we're hoping that'll help, with jurisdictions, that if they're looking that they have like 4 projects that they're currently working at for their system, where they may fit into this on what's their highest priority and how best and what best to apply for.
Okay, and so this could be an early Christmas present because the awards are due on the 23rd of December. So, okay, Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. I think the totals they reflect the conversations that we've had in the past. The match requirement, I like the match requirement. I'm wondering though, is that going to be, and Commissioner Cooley, you might be able to better answer this, but is it going to be more restrictive for some folks? Like if they have, only a set of funds where they have 3 different critical projects and they can only, fund one of them, but they really need 2 and 3, and they're coming to us for help. Is that going to be too restrictive for some folks, especially our smaller cities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And when I was scanning this as people were filing into the fire hall yesterday evening, so I checked in with Mayor Potter, and she said she was expecting that. And so that was good to hear from one mayor of one small city, that had been part of her expectation. I do know that, or one thought I had was that with the planning ones, whether maybe it's a smaller match. And the reason I say that is I'm just thinking, the city of Sheridan, they submitted like a pre-proposal to us around doing their water master plan. And since you'll see in this, the references to the state revolving loan fund and the Senate appropriations and earmarks or congressionally directed spending all required up-to-date master plan that met the eligibility requirements for the water and sewer funds. It might be, we might want to consider lowering the match requirement for those planning grants, just so that we know that those cities can do it right away, so that they'll be eligible for potentially the federal bill.
And the one thing that I would add on the match too, this isn't necessarily requiring a cash match. There's also the in-kind match that also factors in, so that might be something if you were looking at doing, like a jurisdiction. I mean, there's going to be a staff commitment or, by that jurisdiction. I'm just putting out an idea, like if for a planning grant, if it was maybe a 25% match or something out there, would that seem, it seems like 25% of a $200,000 award, I think a lot of jurisdictions would probably have that with their staffing requirements and managing a project like that.
Yeah, I like that idea. I would definitely support that. I just think that part specifically would be a little bit tougher, especially since it's the gateway to some of the more critical projects and needs. So.
And it looks like Carrie unmuted herself, but I just want to add to that. I think that makes sense with currently it's 50% of total or 100% of the grant award. I think that makes sense. And I think that the cities can do that based upon things like their SEC funds. But Carrie, I may have interrupted you, and
No,
pardon me,
you
Chair.
didn't. No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the work on this, and I think what we can do is, there are no other questions. We're pretty much ready to go then. Commissioner Burschauer.
Sorry, Chair, one more question. So it says that we are going to choose a grant committee for this. What's the timeline on that, since it's pretty quick here?
So we would get started on that right away. We've got a couple of people who have volunteered or expressed interest, and so we'll put that together. It really was more conditional on the approval of the details for this, so that we would have some sense of exactly what the selection process would look like. So we'll get started on that right away.
And what we could do is we could come back and when we have the name, the board could stand up this review committee for this grant program, and then approve the committee to do the review. So I think we could do that pretty quickly and come back, because again, we're if I don't have it I'm scrolling up, going back up to the timeline, because if we're looking at opening this and we would close to applications December 8th, and so we'd really be looking at having a review committee following the 8th, then to convene that committee to do the review and prepare recommendations to bring forward to the board.
But we do have people pretty much on the bench who have been just there have been discussions, so it's not like we have to
Mhm.
go out and then begin that
Right.
work. So we can start that. That'd be great. Would love to know, who's stepping up to help us out. That's great. So, okay, well, if there's nothing else, we can move on our agenda. If there's nothing else, do you need a motion to approve the plan?
I think so. And I think I heard consensus about, it sounds like doing the 25% match requirement for planning grants.
Yes. So, Commissioner Kula, did you want to make a motion to this effect?
Yes, I was pulling it up to get the full title, but I move that we approve, oh my goodness, I move that we approve the Yamhill County American Rescue Plan Act Investing in Water and Sewer Infrastructure Competitive Grant Program. Whew,
Okay, so we have
it rolls off the tongue, Chair.
Yeah.
we have a motion to approve. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes, and thanks everybody for your work on this. This is really tedious work, but this is nice to see it at this point, so thanks very much. We can move on to our department updates. We have none. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented, and I beat Vice Chair to it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to H, which is our old business. Consideration of the adoption of written findings and conditions in the matter of upholding the planning director's approval of planning docket SDR 19-21, which is a site design review for the construction of an awning to the existing brewery. The applicant, Christian De Benedetti, location 3203 Northeast Benjamin Road, Newburgh, tax lot 3215-500, and the appellant is Mr. David Wall. And it looks like Colton is with us for findings. Anything you wanted to share about that, Colton?
Not at the moment, but I'm here if there are questions.
Okay, so you've had an opportunity to look at the findings. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve H1.
Motion to approve. Further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. On to item I, which is item I1, other business, consideration of approval of an FTE change to the juvenile probation officer PO2 position from 0.80 FTE to 1 FTE effective December 2021 through June 2022. Do we have a motion to approve?
Chair, I would move that we approve item I1.
Motion to approve. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. On to item I2, consideration of approval of an intergovernmental agreement number 14735 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Youth Authority, OYA, for individual youth support services retroactive to July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2023 in the not to exceed amount of $7,500. And you've had an opportunity to look at the scope of work. If you've got the details here on some of the program types, the definitions, and the skill development they're hoping to achieve. Very, very serious ramifications if these kids don't get the help they need if they're at OYA. So I will make a motion to approve item I2. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item I3, consideration of approval of attorney-client agreement between Yamhill County and Tyler Smith and Associates PC for outside counsel representation in case number 21CV39270, the petition for judicial review of the county's ordinance 913. Now, this has generated some public comment, and I wanted to address that because it came in specifically for this. So Christian, if you wanted to just basically give us what your office has done. This is, as everybody knows, the county has an ordinance, which is been referred to as a Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance. And it was, we expected a challenge from the state, and we have a challenge, as does Harney County. And so the majority of the board has asked that we defend this. And Christian, I know that you've made recommendations early on that the attorney who litigated this in Columbia County would be a good fit for this litigation at the county level. We've looked at other attorneys, we've gotten proposals from other attorneys, and there are a couple of things that I noted regarding hourly rate, regarding experience in this particular issue, but let's make it clear early on, your office made it clear that you did not feel comfortable litigating something like this at this point. So go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that's a accurate summary, as we have often done in the past, when we are involved in litigation, in the interests of putting forward the best defense on behalf of the county. It is necessary to engage outside counsel. It's my opinion and my advice to the board that we do that in this case. I think that gives us the best chance for success on the merits in this case. And as you said, Tyler has been involved in this issue with Columbia County most recently, but also with the efforts to put Second Amendment preservation or Second Amendment sanctuary ordinances either on the ballot or before commissions in other counties across the state for several years. So he does have a significant background and experience in this. And we spoke with him last week. He's available and he's interested in assisting us with this effort. So I think he is a excellent choice for the county to engage to assist us with the defense of Ordinance 913.
Thank you. Would it be a safe and accurate statement to say that this was on your advice?
Absolutely.
Okay. We did receive a public comment, and I'll go ahead, Commissioner Kula.
No, sorry, Chair, I thought there was a pause. If you wanted to read, I just wanted to express that as a reminder to the majority of the board that I don't believe that defending the ordinance in this lawsuit serves the interests of the county or of county residents. But beyond that, given that there are outside counsel options, and to your point about how outside counsel is really necessary if you choose to go ahead with this, I believe it's in the county's best interest to go with an outside counsel with the firm that was presented to us during our executive session. And primarily that's because their law firm has proved successful at litigating these conflicts between counties and the state of Oregon. So if you're looking for a successful outside counsel, that's been my view of the situation, is that rather than having somebody who's specifically Second Amendment, somebody who specifically knows how to work the angle of county state issues. Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I appreciate your weighing in, and it's a good reminder. I know that you haven't been so in favor of us moving forward on this. So thank you for the statement on that. Couple of things. I think it's important to note that Mr. Smith does not specifically do Second Amendment. He has done Second Amendment, and therein lies the experience. But a couple of things, we have had an executive session on this, and I wanted to address an email we received regarding this agenda item having to do with questions. And the questions from Ms. Blaha, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, stated in here, Canby attorney Tyler Smith served as an advisor to you on this resolution, although it's not clear if he was retained and paid by the county, donated his services, or was paid by an outside organization. This would be good to know in the interest of transparency. So Christian, if you could address the fact that Tyler Smith was not paid any county money. He showed up to clarify some points about an ordinance that had been done in another jurisdiction. So we didn't pay him. He was not retained by the county.
That is correct.
Okay. Couple of other
Chair,
things.
I do want to ask though, Commissioner Bershauer, did he write the original ordinance that was brought to us? Because I feel like there was something with that. I can't remember specifically.
I don't know for sure. I think he wrote the Columbia County one, but I took that and then, added edits to the language where it basically made it a little bit more specific and not as broad as to what we were trying to do. Specifically the date of, anything that's on the books as of, prior to now is going to be upheld. Anything going forward will be kind of scrutinized on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of what I remembered, but it's good to be reminded.
Yeah.
So he wrote that. That's where you.
I don't know for sure if he wrote Columbia County. I'm assuming because he defended it legally, but
Okay.
That's consistent with my recollection as well. I'm not certain that he drafted either the exact form of the amendment that Columbia County used or the base document that we started with. I can say that he has been involved in this issue for a number of years, and when this came before the board, I want to say back in 2018, I had conversations with him then because at that point he was already involved with other jurisdictions where these ordinances been brought forward. But I have not been able to establish definitively whether or not he drafted either the Columbia County ordinance or the one that we started with when we considered ours.
Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important that we address some of this misinformation that's coming through on the public testimony, and I've seen other things on social media, but not only to address and correct the record on whether or not he was paid originally, but also the conflict of interest issue. I think that needs to be very clear from the county perspective, not just from me coming forward and saying, there is no conflict of interest in terms of my relationship with him. And for the record, I married into the Bershauer family. I am no longer a Bershauer. I kept my last name because when we got divorced, my son was very young. And so that was a personal decision I made. But I have no direct relationship with Tyler Smith or Sherry Smith. My ex-husband is Sherry's first cousin. So Tyler isn't even directly related to the Bershauers. He's only related by marriage. So I want to be very clear on that. And the statutes are very clear about conflict of interest, whether it be actual or potential. And it states that if there is an actual or potential conflict of interest where your family could be enriched by a decision that you make or could avoid a penalty, in essence, then you must declare it. And it's typically per household. So I'm going beyond that and saying there isn't that per household, but it's also not extended because we don't have a direct familial relationship. And I think it's really important that the county officially states that we don't believe there is an actual or potential conflict of interest. So I'd love to get Christian's feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. The way the ethics statutes work, they are personal to the individual members of the governing body. So if a citizen was inclined to file a complaint because they felt a elected official or a public official had violated those statutes, the complaint would be made against that official. But given what I know about the relationship, it doesn't appear to me that this would be either an actual or a potential conflict of interest based on what I know today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kula.
Chair.
Oh, you were going like this, and I.
Oh no, yeah, because I
read.
read. I've had the privilege of reading the ORS many times, so it's very clear to me what the who is defined as family, and it's broad, but it's tight. That's the thing that's funny about it, if that makes sense. Like what's the immediate family in that ring is broad, but then it's really constricted to that immediate.
So so you've read it before. Your mother-in-law is our county treasurer. I'm sure you've had to address this before, and I'm sure I'm hoping that you've been there's been no conflict there. So in terms of your assessment, you've read the statute. And I know during executive session, you made a comment to the degree that this is a bit of a stretch, but I want to make sure that we're all okay with that, because the one thing that in the beginning, the reason why I asked that we go with other firms is I didn't want there to be I didn't want this to cast a pall on anything. I didn't want there to be any of this, but then again, you know, when it comes to misinformation, it doesn't have to be based in facts, but I think that we need to set the record straight, and we need to be crystal clear on that. And I just wanted to actually to run that by you.
Well, Chair, I am not an ethics attorney, so I'm going to stay out of declaring whether Commissioner Berschauer's relations make this a potential or an actual conflict. Thank you. Though I do know attorneys who could provide that counsel.
No, I'm not asking you to weigh in as an attorney. I think we're all weighing in terms of what we're addressing concerns that are out there. And during executive session, you made a gesture like, wow, that's a stretch. The relationship is not exactly like, it was like, who is this guy and how is he related? Well, he isn't. So I just wanted to make it clear that we are acknowledging that, and that we're not seeing a conflict. That's all.
And for the record, I'll ask that the board not speak as attorneys on this, because I would hate for any of you to be accused of an unlawful practice of law. But I will just say for the record, we do also have some limited insurance under our coverage agreement with CIS that would be available to electeds and other public officials in the event complaints are filed with OGEC. It's coverage that we've accessed before. This is a complaint-driven process. There's nothing that any of us can do about whether or not folks decide to file a complaint. But we've discussed this with the board before. But just to put that out there, we do have some potential coverage available through CIS for these types of complaints should they arise.
Okay, Commissioner
Chair,
Berschauer.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to address one of Commissioner Kula's concerns, and that is that I did seek personal counsel on this, and there was no conflict, actual or potential, that was of concern. But I do think it's important, because I think the narrative out there and the misinformation is targeted at the county as though we are participating in something that is, you know, not above board, and I don't believe that's true. So I think it's very important that you know, county council is also on record saying, look, you know, we're trying to do this to the best of our ability. This particular individual just happens to be you know, very familiar with this issue. He's tried these cases before. I don't really know any other Second Amendment focused attorneys over the state, but then again, I haven't really looked before. But I do think that in terms of his skill level and his experience, he's kind of the biggest bang for the buck. And in terms of our ability to push back, and compared to some of the other options on the table in terms of cost, he was quite a bit lower. So hopefully there is some of that economy of scale where he's done this work before, and he's made that investment, and so we can realize some of the gain on that.
Thank you. Christian.
Well, and without delving too deeply into, you know, the county's legal strategy in responding to the state's petition, at the 35,000 foot level, this really is not a Second Amendment case, right? This is a case that's going to come down to issues of express or implied preemption. It's a Second Amendment ordinance that we're defending, but it's not a Second Amendment case in that sense. And Tyler does have experience with these preemption issues, most recently in Columbia County and previously as well. So I think he does have appropriate experience both on the more specific Second Amendment aspects, which may come up as part of our response to this, but also on the other claims that the state has brought forward. So I'm confident in his ability to do a great job for the county on this.
Okay, well, at this time, I'll ask for a motion, which is item I3, consideration of approval. I'll let whoever's going to make the motion.
Chair, I'll make a motion.
It's not going to be Commissioner Kula, I'm guessing.
Chair, it shall not be me.
That's fine.
Although I did think about it, only because if nobody makes it, I know you wanted to vote on it.
Chair, I move approval of the attorney-client agreement between Yamhill County and Tyler Smith and Associates PC for outside counsel representation in case number 21CV39270, the petition for judicial review of ordinance 913.
Okay, motion to approve. Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. We'll move on to item 4.
Madam
I4.
Chair,
Yes.
one other thing I wanted to mention is, as we've also discussed before, Colton and I will remain actively involved in this case with Tyler, and we've had conversations with him, and to the extent it makes sense for the overall defense of the ordinance and prosecution of this case, we will stay engaged, and hopefully that will both add to the quality of the final product and also keep the costs down as much as possible. So we'll work closely with him to do that. And as you mentioned, this is something that the state has also filed a petition against Harney County. So we'll have some additional communication with Harney County to see where their board is and if they've decided whether or not to pursue defense of their ordinance. And so we don't know yet whether or not they will also choose to defend or get involved, but we'll keep the board updated on those aspects of this as we move forward. And we did speak with DOJ earlier this year, and we do have an extension on the time before the county needs to file its initial response. So we've got time now to begin aggressively pursuing this.
Thank you. I appreciate your work on this from your office. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon counties to be fighting these battles at the local level, because this case has national implications. And I think just editorializing here, what we've seen coming out of the federal and state government regarding Second Amendment issues and Second Amendment usurpations, I think it's going to be up to us. And I want to be determined to defend the rights of law-abiding gun owners. So we'll move on to item I4, consideration of approval of purchasing Windows 10 enterprise licenses from tech heads in the amount of $38,815 for the 2021-22 fiscal year. This was a recent addition to our agenda, but there's some urgency to it. Ken, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I was just going to share, apologies for the late addition. Shane found that we had some licensing that was expiring, and in order to keep us operating, this was something on short notice that Shane had to put together. And like he put in the memo, he apologized for the late addition, but we were up against a timeline. And because this is over the dollar amount that I can approve, that's why we quickly wanted to get this before the board to make sure we stay in compliance with our licensing agreements.
Yeah, I saw that email from Shane and I thought, well, I'm so glad we have somebody who's really keeping an eye on that. So I would move approval of item I4, consideration of approval of purchasing Windows 10 enterprise licenses from tech heads in the amount of $38,815. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Okay, now we can go on to item J. We've already addressed item J1. Now we can move on to item J2, which is a public hearing. So at this time, we'll open up the public hearing. And let me get my handy dandy cheat sheet here. And we'll call for abstentions for members of the board. But this is in relation to docket RD1-23-21, which is an appeal of the planning director's approval of a replacement dwelling at 11940 Southeast Boyer Road, McMinnville. The applicant is Ronald Martin. The appellant is Barbara Boyer. So we have our planning director here. Thank you very much for all the information, getting us up to speed. The hearing is open. Do we have any abstentions by members of the board? Commissioner Kula?
No, Chair, but I will say that I should declare a potential conflict of interest since I am an owner of farmland, and decisions like this may affect the finances of my farm.
So I was going to do that every time, since I have timber property, every time somebody brings a land use question before us that has a tree on their property, I was going to have to declare it because I have trees on my property. In any event,
I'm a proud owner of trees on my property too.
You got trees? Okay, we at least they like hard to get away from trees in Yamhill County. Okay, so there are no abstentions. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the board to hear the matter before it? Okay. And does any board member need to announce and state on the record the substance of any ex parte contact? Any site visits?
No, Chair.
Okay, we have none. So we'll go ahead and Mr. Friday, are you going to read the statements required by law?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Oregon law requires that persons who attend a land use hearing be advised of certain rights and duties before the hearing begins. First, with regard to the standards for approval, state law ORS 197.763 sub 5 requires that we list the applicable substantive criteria that must be met in order for the county to approve the application. And I'll list those in a few moments. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the standards for approval. Second, the raise it or waive it rule. Under Oregon law, any issue that might be raised in an appeal of the county's decision in this matter must be raised before the record of this hearing is closed. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the board based on that issue. Third, and this is directed towards the applicant, under ORS 197.796, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval, again with sufficient specificity to allow the county to respond to the issue, precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Finally, I'll note that under Oregon law, and because this is the initial evidentiary hearing on this matter, any participant, that is anyone who submits oral or written testimony during this hearing, may, before the record is closed, request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. The request must be made prior to the time the chair announces that the hearing is closed.
Thank you, Mr. Friday. And do we have a staff report?
Yes.
You're doing that too?
Yeah, that's me. The property is 0.87 acres and has access to Boyer Road. Parcel contains a manufactured dwelling and outbuildings and is zoned EF80. The immediate area is also zoned EF80, exclusive farm use. Properties to the west across Highway 99 also contain RC, recreation commercial, and LDR 12,000 low density residential. And this area has the Bayou Drive golf course and subdivision. Water and sewer are provided to the manufactured dwelling by on-site systems. The parcel is predominantly composed of class 2 high-value soils. A replacement dwelling inspection was performed on the dwelling, and it was determined to have intact exterior walls and roof structure, indoor plumbing consisting of a kitchen sink, toilet, and bathing facilities connected to a septic system, interior wiring for interior lights, and a heating system. An approval letter and neighboring was then sent out, and neighboring property owner notice was mailed August 31st of this year, and an appeal was filed September 15th. There are no previous actions in this tax lot file number 301. However, there were previous actions on the adjacent lot, tax lot number 300. This tax lot had a hardship dwelling approval on June 21st, 1983. I did want to explain that in deciding this request, I did investigate to see if this had been approved as a hardship dwelling. The manufactured dwelling has been out there for decades, so the records are understandably old. The evidence against this being a hardship dwelling was the tax lot for the hardship dwelling was approved on 300, not 301. The dwelling had its own septic system, where hardship dwellings typically share a septic system. The dwelling was on its own parcel, while hardship dwellings are on the same lot as the principal dwelling. This dwelling was not on our hardship dwelling renewal list, so it had not been getting notice that it needed to be renewed if it was a hardship. This dwelling was not placed on the assessment rolls when it was established, if it was established as a hardship in 1983. And in the staff report, I speculate on reasons for these discrepancies, but I couldn't explain away all of them. So I couldn't say with certainty that this dwelling was a hardship dwelling from 1983. The criteria to decide this are in section 402.02M, 402.04A6, and those are adopted regulations based on ORS 215.283 sub 1P and ORS 215.491. That ends this portion of the staff report.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the applicant's case. Do we have testimony in support of the application? And it looks like we have Mr. and Mrs. Martin joining us. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Mr. Martin.
Morning.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, we sure can. All right.
Okay. I sent in a statement. Do you want me to read that? I'm not familiar with this operation.
That's okay. We kind of wing it every time we do this, but no, you did send that in. But if there's anything you wanted to say at this point to address or underscore the written testimony that you've submitted, now would be a good time.
Well, if I'm not reading that, I do feel that we did our due diligence prior to purchasing the property and a new manufactured home to place on it, at significant expense. County records, title search, escrow, nothing showed any issues. I don't know what else we could have or should have done. And, in reading some of the, you start reading all this law and you just start spinning in a circle. But to me, the purpose of this EF80 designation is to protect land that is suitable and desirable for commercial agricultural operations. This 0.87 acre lot, had a long time septic field right in the middle of it, would not meet this standard. And not allowing a replacement dwelling will have no positive impact on the EF80 purpose. I think allowing a replacement with a new manufactured home will have a positive impact on the adjacent properties and allow the parcel to continue being used as a rural residential lot, which it has always been, as far as I could see. And I think this lot was established well before the EF 20, 40, or 80 laws went into effect. So it's really all I can deal with is from the time of our purchase until this point. So I'm hoping that, you will allow us to replace the home, especially since there's no way it's going to return to commercial farming property.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Martin. Questions, commissioners? Mr. Friday.
I was going to ask a question, Director Friday. So,
well, I was just going to say, in your letter and in your testimony, you had told me at the counter how much you have invested in this and spent on this, and I thought you might want to get that into the record. So, Mr. Martin, how much have you invested in this project so far?
Oh, we are right at about $300,000 for the property and the new manufactured home. And a significant amount of time and, preparation, to get contractors and that kind of thing to replace the home, build the pad, do all those kind of things, put better drainage in. So, you know, it's a beautiful place, and we want to make it more beautiful. And we also, you know, we're in the process of moving here to help out my sister and her husband with his elderly mother, and also people in the family have issues. So we're moving to get, you know, so we'll live right close to each other so we can help each other out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Commissioner Kula.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And mostly this is, I can wait to ask this, but Director Friday is here and answering questions. So Director Friday, it really looks, and looking at the pictures and driving down that road, that this is an area. So Mr. Martin said, well, this is a rural residential area. And my counter would be, well, it's zoned exclusive farm use. Is there some reason why there's all these little parcels here in what does look like a rural residential area?
Just that the development pattern was there when the zoning was adopted is really my only explanation for this.
Oh, so Director, does that mean, are you saying it was developed in this way when when zoning was adopted?
At least the parcelization appears to have already been in place when the zoning came into effect in the mid 70s.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, because I had the same thing. I have the picture here that shows all of the different parcels, and it is kind of confusing. You know, why do we have all these different residential? We've got 1 acre and 0.86 acre, and so in terms of the farming concept, and also was there a mention in here of the classification of soils? Ken, did you have something in there about that? Did I see that it was
yes. It's class 2 soil, and the reason that's important is you have to have class 4 through 8 soils in order to qualify the property for a non-farm dwelling. So they would have to do a soil test. The soil test would have to come back with it being class 4 through 8 for them to even apply. I'm not saying qualify, but just even to apply for a non-farm dwelling on this property.
Commissioners, further questions? Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. Ken, I was trying to go back and look at when you guys started the renewal, you know, when you started doing the renewal list for the hardship dwellings. When was that?
And I talked to the previous director because I thought I knew, and I got from him that he thought we went back to about 1990 or 1988. We started the renewal process about 1992 or 1993, and we went back, several years for the ones that we had record of, but the ones back in the 80s and 70s, we did not try to research those or try to go back and send reminders on those. And part of that is that's in the 90s is when we had the regulation adopted by the state that we needed to go back and have a system in place to check on these.
Okay, so we don't really know if it was a hardship dwelling dating back to the 70s or 80s, technically.
That's correct. At least I'm not able to say with certainty that this was the hardship dwelling.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have, go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Thinking one of the things that a hardship dwelling, and my research says that it must be placed on the same property as the people requesting it. Well, this has been placed on its own separate property from the beginning. And it's had its own septic, its own electricity, its own well. It's a shared well, but it is on that property, not on the other property. It's on our property. So it just seems like if this was truly this hardship issue, somewhere in county records, when the title company does a title search, it should show somewhere. I should be able to know that there's an issue. And that really is not the case. It still does not show any issue in the county records. Because no request was ever made for hardship on this parcel. 300. I mean, sorry, 301. 301. So anyway, I'm just trying to figure out how we could have done anything different and how not approving this will benefit anyone.
That's a good question. So Ken Friday, what would have been, if, in terms of due diligence, what would a potential property owner do other than what was done?
Other than going through the it wasn't in tax number 301 that you had the hardship dwelling file. So I think it's not reasonable to expect someone to look at neighboring properties or look at what we call the parent parcel to see whether or not there was some sort of a land use action on it. So I don't know. I don't know what would have been more due diligence. It sounds like he took a reasonable amount of due diligence on this property, and I, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else that he should have or that I would have done.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, commissioners? If not, we can move on to further testimony in support of the application. Do we have anyone else to testify in support of the application? Okay. If we don't have any more testimony.
Oh, Chair,
Yes.
looks like Ken saw it too.
Ken?
We did have somebody raise their hand in the audience, wanting to give testimony in support.
In
so-
support. Okay.
So I think we're just waiting to get promoted to the panel.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. Mr. Dennis Bernards, thank you. And would you state your name and address for the record, please? And we did receive your comment. Thank you for that.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Bernard, and I live in the adjoining property at 11946 Southeast Boyer Road. Tax lot 30 or 300. I should mention that.
All right, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I can maybe shed a little light on the zoning. Just if you go back and look at history, Boyer Road used to be 99W. That is the original 99W. So that passed these properties on the east side. Okay. Went down by the railroad trestle. They had a bridge across the Am Hill there. In the early 60s, they put in the new bridge next to the Bayou Golf Course. Now 99W split these residential houses apart from the residential houses in the Bayou area. And I think if you're painting a broad brush for zoning boundaries, 99W is a nice, easy place to draw a line on a map. Okay, I'm speculating this, but it makes sense to me. So now these houses on this side of 99W are in this EF80. Well, it's progressed up to EF80. It started out, I think, at EF40. But at one time, these houses, there is record that they were actually in that 12,000 low density residential area. The back records show that. But somewhere along the line, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I mean, who knows? But they used to be counted as residentials, and over the years, now it's been thrown into EF80. But I suspicion the 99W being shifted over is what made that, probably potentially easier to do. As far as effects here, I mean, the properties here have always been residential. That history just shows that that's what this area, this I call it a cul-de-sac because there's like 5 houses right here down this little road. All of these, there's a lot of easements between us, the residents here, because we share the driveway. There's some drainage lines that go through properties. There's a lot of easement on record. In all of those easements and in all of the deeds when this property has changed hands, These two lots have always been identified as separate properties. The survey descriptions have always been separate. You know, it's never been, tax lot 300 and 301 have never been the same property. It's always been split. Now, my folks, Norman and Louise Bernards, bought this property from Delbert and Aline Parr. In that deed, it's two separate properties, one sale, but both property descriptions are in there. Okay, so it's historically always been two separate properties here. I think I sent in a survey from 1965. It shows two separate properties. So there's never been one joint property and it's split later. When I went to buy this tax lot 301 from my parents, I went down to the planning office. I'm unfamiliar with land use laws and all that, but I went down and said, I want to split 300, tax lot 300 in half and buy that half from my parents. Can I do that? And they said, well, you don't have to do that. It's two separate lots. There is no need for that. And I said, there's a mobile on there and I want to upgrade that at some point. I want to either put a stick-built house or a new mobile, whatever. Can I do that? Well, yeah, no problem, because there's a mobile there. And the lady that helped me explained the mobile home renewal process. You know, if you want to do that, this is the process of doing it. So great. I bought the property from my parents. We stayed there for a number of years. After my grandparents died, we moved in and we stayed there. And my personal plan was, once I got my parents paid off, then to put a house on the property. Okay. During that time frame, it was several years after I made the purchase, but my father died of cancer. My mother has now advanced Parkinson's disease. So she needs to sell this property to pay for medical reasons and that type of thing. I want to keep this property in the family. We have a long history here. So in order to do that, I decided to sell 301. I wanted to sell it to one of my kids so that they could take care of me in my old age. You know, we've got that tradition going. But it's not the good time for that. So and in order to keep the main house in my family, knowing it has to be sold because it's financially for my mother, I bought the house. I'm planning to buy the house. So I could buy the house, that funds my mother's medical, and I need to sell this other property for that down payment. But I want to keep it in the family. Well, up jumps Ron wanting to move this area so that he can take care of some family members, and he helps us out here tremendously. He helps my wife and I take care of my mother quite regularly. So we get a lot of financial help for that. But if this house is not improved, if this property is not allowed to have a continuing house on it, it becomes worthless. It's no good as farm ground, and now it's no good for residential. We got this 0.7, 0.8 acres out here. It's worthless. I cannot, in good conscience, strap my brother-in-law with that. I will need to buy that property back from him for what he paid for. That gets rid of my down payment for this house. It makes the main house now unsellable. Okay. I mean, I can't keep it in the family. I'll have to sell it to, somebody and raise the money for my mother's care that way. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of financial and lifestyle changes here that would have to happen. And I mention that because these decisions affect lives. And for me, it's a tremendous change. I've retired. I don't have the funds necessarily to go buy a house at my age. I didn't plan. My financial plan was to have my house paid for when I retired. Now I got to go buy a house. You think of all the things that this changes and affects by not putting a house on a piece of ground that has always been a residential piece. So I would urge you to approve this for that reason. You know, the house has been here for, I mean, the mobile's been here for over 3 decades. It's got its own septic, you know, sewer. It's got its own electric. You know, it's an independent piece. And to make that little 0.8 acres, you know, to drop the value that much and not be able to make it usable for anything, to me is just not the right path to go down. But turning it back to farm ground is, I mean, today's equipment, you couldn't go on there and turn around with a piece of combine. It's just a small little chunk. And I think it needs to remain to the purpose that it's historically been, and that's as a residence.
Thank you, Mr. Bernards. Do we have questions, commissioners?
No, Chair, I do not.
No
But
questions, but
I was going to say the
I
but,
just
yeah.
wanted to say no questions, but Dennis, I thank you for your honesty and being open about your situation. It is very personal. These decisions do affect lives. So thank you.
And I appreciated the historic context of where 99 went. I saw it in your testimony, but I was so curious about why this wasn't also zoned rural residential. And I think that your historical kind of context for it is helpful. Even if it's not what happened, it's a way of explaining this slice of homes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there any other testimony in support of the application? If there is not, we'll go ahead and move on to the appellant's case. And we will have the appellant. Appellant is Barbara Boyer. Barbara, are you here? Okay, Mrs. Boyer?
Let me in?
Yes,
Let me
Mrs.
in?
Boyer. Yes, would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Of course, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm honored to be sitting before you today. My name is Barbara Boyer and I reside at 12255 Southeast Boyer Road, McMinnville, Oregon. I've been a resident here for 30 years. And I really appreciate Mr. Bernard's historical perspective of this area. It is a unique area of the county. Actually, Boyer Road is a concrete road, which you do not see very often anymore. So it's kind of fun having that historical perspective. So I want to start out today by saying this is not a popularity contest. This is not who has the sadder story. This is all about facts. And as you can tell from the Director Friday's findings, all of his findings are based on assumption. And there is a signed affidavit by somebody who lived in that area from 1968 or 69, I can't remember, to 2003, who states exactly what that mobile home is. And it is a hardship dwelling. And as Director Friday stated, he can't be certain that it is a hardship dwelling. And I would like to draw your attention to the section 3 of the hearing packet. And it's a hardship dwelling. And it's page 3, and it talks about how this lot size is 1.25 acres. And everybody's talking about 300 and 301. 301 did not exist at that time. This was one parcel. I'm confused as to when it got separated. And then I would like to draw your attention to, where is it? Shoot.
Barbara, or Ms. Boyer, is that in your appeal section? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I actually see it. I remember seeing it, but the 1.2 acre.
It's so it's the section 3 of this packet where it says 1983 hardship dwelling approval. And then the next sheet is land. There's no page numbers. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any. So it's one.
Oh, I see it. It says 1. It's
One-
one and
one
then
and a
1/4.
quarter. Right, but then somewhere else in the document from the county, it talks about 1.25 acres. And it's actually findings of facts, number 2. And then,
thank you.
Yep. And then conclusionary on the same document, number 7 and number 8 stand out to me also. So it talks about the 1.25 acres there. All of my research, 301 did not exist when all this happened. That's what I'm finding. This all happened on 300 because 301 did not exist. And 1.25 acres of class 2 soil, I could find many people who would farm that. It'd be great. Blueberry ground, yes, not a combine, not grass seed. Wheat. Even hay, because the equipment would not get around. But I could see a caneberry farm, a blueberry farmer would be great on that piece of property. And they used to board horses there. The Bernards did. So it has potential. And in closing for me today, if this application is approved, I feel the county is setting a precedence that they support exploiting loopholes.
Thank you,
And
Mrs.
that is
Boyer. Thank you, Mrs. Boyer. Do we have questions, commissioners?
Chair, I think my question would be to coming back to that, the comment about exploiting a loophole. And I just wonder, Ms. Boyer, if you have, Director Friday was very careful in his language of like, okay, so here's, given that this is a balance case, like an iffy situation, I'm balancing towards, on the balance, I'm balancing towards giving approval in the original approval. Can you see a scenario where this happens at with a parcel that's 200 or how about 85 acres or 70 acres of class 2 with an uncertainty around? I'm just not seeing an example out there with a larger parcel, but maybe you can see that.
Are you asking Barbara that question?
Yes, please.
I'm not understanding your question.
Well, you were saying that this is setting precedent for development on farmland, but since Director Friday said this is a close one, and that because of the lack of information, he leaned towards approval originally. I'm just wondering if you can see a scenario with a bigger parcel, because that's part of what this seems like. Is it's a small parcel. The balance shifts to, yeah, this could have been a home site originally. That's appropriate for a replacement dwelling. I'm wondering if you have an example of how this could be out in the future with a bigger parcel and the precedent that's set with this. And it isn't precedent, I just want to note, but it's a habit of approving.
I mean, I've been following land use in Yamhill County since 2004. I'm very well versed on the applications that come through. I don't have any examples of something like that. I'm basing it on facts, and there is a signed affidavit from somebody who actually lived there when that mobile home was placed. So I just feel it's a loophole. I feel like, yes, this got lost in county paperwork. And I just think the dwelling needs to be removed because the hardship is over. And it's proven right in here in the hearing documents that it was a hardship dwelling.
Questions, commissioners? Thank you, Commissioner Kula. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Boyer, so we've received considerable testimony from the other neighbors kind of around this area that they seem like they're in support of it, that it won't really necessarily negatively impact them. I'm curious as to what you would say is your negative impact on you and your farm and in your dwelling as a neighbor?
Nothing negative, just it's factual to me. It's just, I just don't want to see the county set a precedent that this was a hardship dwelling and now it's just a replacement dwelling. So I feel like they'd have to go through a whole other land use process to get a dwelling there. And I did learn something today from Director Friday. I never knew that class 4 through 8 had to be identified soil for non-farm dwelling. That was fun to learn today. Thank you. So no negative impact, just it's all factual. And,
Okay.
you know, when I have a hard time with everybody having a straight face saying that this was not a hardship dwelling.
So I guess my follow-up question is for Ken. I'm not familiar with hardship dwellings, but is it customary when you're going to place a hardship dwelling on your property for a person to set up an entirely new septic system and a well and have a drain field and all of that stuff? Is that pretty standard or is that unusual?
That's unusual. The hardship dwelling is if you have a relative who's aged or has health-related issues. We accept a note from a doctor if they're under 70 years old, or if their parents or relatives are over 70, you can apply for a hardship dwelling. It can be a manufactured dwelling, recreational vehicle, or you can modify an existing structure on site for the dwelling. And typically, you're required to hook into the existing septic system unless the sanitarian finds that the existing septic system won't fulfill that. As far as wells, you know, we don't regulate those, so I don't know if it's common for it to have its own well. I'd say it probably is uncommon for it to be on its own well, but you know, it's up to them. Then when the hardship is no longer there, the property owner is supposed to remove it. And we send them a notice every 2 years saying, hey, you need to either renew this, tell us that you still have the hardship, and sometimes have the septic system about every 5 years. We have the septic system checked out to make sure it's still functioning for both systems. And so that's our normal process for a hardship dwelling.
Thank you. I have.
Madam Chair, can I make, Madam Chair, can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So isn't it my understanding that the septic can't be within 100 feet of the well?
Yeah, under the setback is the drain field would not be able to be within 100 feet of the well. The septic tank itself, I believe, can be within 50 feet of the well.
Okay, so I think that's the issue why the septic was put in. And is my understanding there's only one well. Right now, there's a shared well between them.
And I don't know you know, where the well is located or anything like that, other than what's on the maps. That might be something that can be addressed in rebuttal.
Okay, further questions?
Well, and so based on the fact of the whole renewal, why they didn't get notice is because the mobile home was there, the hardship dwelling in 1983, and you didn't start doing county did not start doing the renewal process until 1992, and they didn't go as far back as 1983. So that's why I feel like it got lost.
Yeah, that's my speculation, and I guess I guess I'm curious, and I'm not trying to corner you or anything, but I'm curious, since you've lived out there for 30 years, did you know about this beforehand? And would there we are complaint driven, so if you had submitted a complaint, we would have tried to investigate and see. Is there a reason that that you didn't do this earlier?
I started doing research earlier, and then sometimes, like I think Mr. Martin said, sometimes when you start going through all the paperwork and the legal jargon, your head kind of starts, and then I put it aside, and life happens.
And I understand that.
Okay, Commissioner Burschauer, did you have your hand up or were you just
Thank
fixing
you,
your hair?
Chair. Sorry, one more clarifying question. So at some point after 1983, this became a separate tax lot. Can someone clarify for me when that happened?
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
It was as it in 1983, it says 1.25. I have no idea. We never got notice of, neighbors never got notice of, adjusting the tax, the lot line adjustment. So I haven't, that's confusing to me also.
I think I can answer that. The tax lot at that time did not get assigned unless the property was separated. So you could purchase two lots side by side, and it could be parcel 1, parcel 2 on the deed, and the deed would show it as 1.25 acres. And then the assessor's office would only assign one tax lot number to that. They wouldn't assign two, even though you had two lots. The county planning ordinance has a provision in the definition section that says that a parcel exists if there was a deed or land sales contract recorded on or prior to October 3rd, 1975. I believe this has a deed showing that there were two lots back in 1965, but there was only one tax lot number. And it would probably not have been until the property was sold to Dennis Bernard's when they would have assigned another tax lot number. And so that's probably when you would have had tax lot number 301 created. I don't have, the date of when that was created or assigned, but looking at the old maps, there is a tax lot number 300, and then the newer maps have tax lot number 301, the ones in the 2000s.
Commissioners, any other questions?
No, Chair.
Do we have further testimony in opposition to the application? Is there anyone else who will be opposing this? Okay, we'll go ahead and have, let's see, public agency reports.
There were no public agency reports.
All right, we'll move on to rebuttal by the applicant. So this would be an opportunity if Mr. Martin is here, if he wanted to give a rebuttal to anything Mrs. Boyer said. It's not necessary, but you do have that opportunity if Mr. Martin is still on the meeting. We'll wait a moment. Okay, Mr. Martin, you're back. So you have an opportunity to do a rebuttal to any of the testimony that Mrs. Boyer shared today.
Yeah, just some of the things about the different size of the lot and everything that this, she said she could farm a 1.25. All the things that I saw were different on permit requests and written things like that. I didn't see any legal documents that said this was a 1.25 acre. In fact, I saw 1.50, I saw 2.25, 1.25. So it was when a lot of those permit requests were done back then, it was just like throw a number in there kind of. So I don't know if there's actually a legal document that states that lot 301 was ever any more than a 0.87 acre. So that's kind of an issue that I have with that. But again, I just don't see any benefit at all. I understand Barbara's, or Miss Boyer, I'm sorry, I don't know her that well. I don't know her at all. I see her point about not setting a precedent, but I don't feel that this is a precedent. And I think the the explanation of these parcels right here that have all been allowed to be built on were probably part of the other parcel across present to Highway 99. So anyway, I appreciate your consideration on this and hope that you can see that the best interest of everybody, I believe, would be to approve the replacement. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Okay, do we have a staff recommendation?
Yeah, staff recommends approval of the request based on the evidence in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Friday. So we'll go ahead and close the hearing and we'll begin deliberations. Commissioners' thoughts?
I guess I can kick us off here.
Okay, Commissioner Bershauer.
You know, I feel like there's some confusing elements to this. But as I look at the map, and granted, I haven't done any site visits, but as I look at the map, this cluster of homes seems to be a bit of an anomaly. I mean, if you look at the adjacent lots, they are farm ground as far as it appears. But if you look at the adjacent or adjoining tax lots, 200 and 400, there seems to be multiple homes on each one. In fact, it looks like there's a home that actually sits on the property line or over the property line on one of them. So however this anomaly sort of became and was created, I don't know. It does not appear that this particular lot 301 would be conducive to farming. It looks like it's like the other ones. It's treed and a driveway. And it also has an additional structure on it. So I guess, you know, my concern is that at some point this was given a separate tax lot number, and it doesn't appear to me that someone would have been able to purchase it or separate it, especially from a bank's perspective if it didn't. So I don't know why the records on that aren't clear. But you know, I'm leaning towards approving it just because you know, it seems like the function of this over the past 30 some years has been as a residence. And I appreciate Mrs. Boyer's points. I think she makes good points. But it does appear that this particular area is kind of an anomaly, and the highest and best use of this particular tax lot would be to allow a continued home site on. Those are my feelings.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kula, thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have lots, but I will distill them down. I think that my not immediate jumping into one approval or denial mirrors, I think, in some ways, Commissioner Bershauer's thoughts about this. When I really, and Commissioner Bershauer, if you keep going down Boyer Road until you get to basically right before the train trestle, it's small lots like this kind of down the way. But you're right that it does appear that there's at least 2 homes on that like end lot. In looking at it really closely, I don't see how there's enough space on 300 for the drawings that we have in the packet of 2 septic systems and 2 homes, one being a mobile with a shed and the other one being like a stick-built home. If you'll recall, sorry, I should have had the page open, but there's the drawing. Oh yeah, so there's this drawing here. And if you look at the 301 in the aerial photo versus 300, I honestly, as a person who I installed my own septic system and I got a replacement dwelling permit, I don't see how there's room for both of those parcels with septic systems on one single tax lot, unless unless that tax lot has been divided lately. And this is me coming into it going, oh, of course, we should just approve this. The facts weigh us towards approval of the replacement dwelling permit and denying the appeal. But when I really look at the drawing, I don't see how it's possible for 300 to fit the 2 homes and the shop. And especially if you look at the shop that's beside the mobile home in the drawing of the 2 septic tanks actually matches the aerial photo that exists right now of like present day conditions of the shop down at the end and then the home to the east, to the northeast. So this isn't precedent setting in the same way that a case that goes to the Supreme Court and they're making of a decision. This isn't that, but I do have some concerns about the attempt to split off tax parcels and say, oh well, there's a hardship, or there isn't a hardship dwelling on this one. This was actually a full-fledged legal residence of its own, and I do see that potential around the county. But I will say that on the other hand, this is a very small parcel under what seems to be unique conditions of being bordered by a gravel or possibly asphalt driveway and a concrete road. And it is a small tax parcel, but at the same time, I do recognize that Reverend Ward knows about farming and does know that some things could be grown there. So I would say I would move approval for this, but for this drawing that's I don't see any way that it is one tax lot 300. So Chair, sorry, that was a lot of rambling, but I would welcome your thoughts.
I wasn't sure when you said you would move approval of supporting the planning director, or denying the appeal, or how would, I wasn't sure what you meant.
Yeah, no, I'm not ready for a motion, but I was ready to agree with the planning director's original decision. But for looking at this drawing more closely, I don't see how it's possible that it's one tax lot in the drawing.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. This was one of those, there were a lot of sticking points, but I think one of for me, the director's observation was very powerful. I have a lot of confidence in Ken Friday, and I think perhaps in 8 years almost that I've been a commissioner, I think I've disagreed or not agreed with his conclusions, maybe twice, right? And so I was looking at this, and he did make a point. He said this manufactured home has been on this property for perhaps 4 decades, and it has a driveway and a well and a septic system. And it says that the dwelling should be removed as a hardship dwelling and should no longer exist on the property. But the point he makes, which is really powerful for me, when he says the question comes to mind is what benefit would result in removing this? We're looking at a small parcel. In terms of, I understand the stated purpose of the zoning is that we protect farmland, but what we're looking at in terms of the size of the parcel, the fact that there's a well and a septic system on here with a driveway, what we would do in essence, especially at a time when we're looking as a state at ADUs and to allow for housing, for additional housing for people to be able to have a place to live. So removing this really just takes away from the opportunity for someone to have a home. It renders this 0.87 acre property basically pretty much useless. And so so for that, I would deny the appeal of the director's approval of this. And I think that everything points to it being just pretty much one of those kind, common sense things that we do, even though we've got lots of rules and regulations. So, Commissioner Kula, I've made a motion.
That's right.
Further
And
discussion.
we're in further discussion now. So 2 things. I'm not sure if this is really a situation where we're in the discretion versus the applying the rules. Applying the facts to the rules. But what I'd love to do is hear more from Director Friday about his sub 1 on page 4 of the staff report. And that's the sub 1 is the footnote 1, which is since the Supreme Court's decision in Brent Maher, ... Can you add to that, Director? Because I am tempted to vote against the motion, but I want to hear more about that footnote from you before I go with Commissioner Sterrett.
Yeah, there actually are two things about this case I think that from a land use standpoint are interesting, and that is that there are subsection 1 uses and subsection 2 uses in ORS 215.283. And instead of saying that ORS, I'm just going to say sub 1 and sub 2. And there was a court case out of Jackson County that, the county was looking like they were being more restrictive on what was listed as a subsection 1 use. And the case went to the Oregon Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't be more restrictive, counties. The subsection 1 uses are uses as of a right that property owners have out in the rural area. And LCDC can make administrative rules about them, but those are uses that the counties can't be more restrictive on. The subsection 2 uses the counties can be more restrictive on, and sometimes they can just decide not to offer some of those subsection 2 uses. Those that are subsection 2 are generally conditional uses. Subsection 1s they might have a site design, or they may just be an outright permitted use. In looking at this, I didn't see this before making the decision, but I saw it in the when I was doing the research on this. There isn't anything in the 2 House bills that were passed that allowed replacement dwelling and expanded replacement dwellings. There's nothing in there that refers back to hardship dwellings. And so it made me think, I think that might be an oversight, but it's I think a pretty important thing to point out, that there's nothing in there on replacement dwellings that says you can't do this as a replacement of a hardship dwelling. If there is precedent, well, it was already set by the legislature. It wouldn't be set by us. The second thing that I think is interesting about this is we have a code that's non-conforming use, and our code says we can go back 10 years and look back 10 years and see whether the use has continued uninterrupted, or the structure has been occupied continuously for at least 10 years prior to the date of application for verification of the nonconformity. Well, I would submit, if this is the hardship dwelling, then the hardship dwelling no longer was a hardship dwelling when the grandparents no longer were using it. Well, that's from I don't have the exact date, but that's got to be over 20 years ago that the grandparents stopped using it, and it's continued as a use, as a dwelling, at least from what the applicant and the Dennis Bernards has said. It's continued for that amount of time, and I think you could make findings that, well, since there was no complaint about it, it's existed there for more than 10 years as a non-conforming use. I think you could actually make findings that it is a non-conforming use, and I put that down as footnote number 2. So those are also 2 things that may affect this application, I guess. And finally, I'd say I always hear that hey, this decision is going to set a precedent, and it sometimes does, but it's pretty rare. You rarely have something that goes to court and actually sets a precedent. Usually this is a unique circumstance, unique situation. I don't think there's a whole lot of these types of dwellings out there in the rural area that we're not tracking after, having a tracking system set up for at least nearly 30 years.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I May,
Yes,
thank you. I
Commissioner.
really appreciate that, Director Friday. It's helpful. I read them and I didn't know what to make of both of those footnotes, so I have a better understanding now. I do want to note, Chair, that Barbara Boyer did have her hand raised. And so if it was, she doesn't now, but I was realizing that if this was, she wanted to ask to keep the record open, it would be good to hear that now, right?
Okay, I'm not.
I don't know if that's what it is, but it's a possibility, right?
Okay. And that would be not for additional testimony, but just to keep the record open. So yes, Mrs. Boyer, if you would like to keep the record open, this would be the time. This would be the time to request that. Keep the record open, generally 3 weeks for new rebuttal or final word. Commissioner Ken.
I just wanted to throw the question to either Christian or Ken, but I thought, because didn't we close? Was the request supposed to be made prior to the closing of the hearing?
Yes. So, okay, so let's go back.
My hand's been up quite a while.
I'm sorry. I don't see anybody's hands up. I apologize for that. So if we miss that, we can certainly go back and allow for the record to be open. Is that a request?
Well, just a reminder that if we do,
Yes, please. Sorry.
you know,
Okay.
the process that the applicant and the rebuttal, I'm looking at Ken here really quick to
You're
weigh in
looking at
on the
Christian.
process, or Christian.
Yeah, the 3 weeks that it would be extended would be, if I'm understanding this right, Ken, a week for new, a week for rebuttal, and then a week for final word. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
But
Okay, so it's not 3 weeks for new testimony.
Right.
I want to make sure that we're okay process-wise, because we closed the hearing and we had entered into deliberations and there was a motion made. And we were in further discussion. So would we need to close that if we're considering doing something different and reopen the hearing to proceed? I'm trying to make sure that we're on point with process.
Christian?
Yeah. Ken, you want me to take that, or?
Yeah, I'd like you to take that one.
So yeah, the board hasn't made a final decision. So I think if the board wants to, I don't know if we would technically need to reopen the hearing. I think we've received the request. The board is willing to consider the request. If Ken thinks it makes sense for us to go ahead, reopen the hearing, get that request on the record as part of the hearing, and then we would set over and reopen the hearing, in 3 weeks' time, and give the board a chance to receive that new testimony. And then I don't know if we would again have additional testimony from the applicant or the appellant, or if I think we're just opening this to accept additional written testimony, and there wouldn't be any additional oral testimony. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, so there would be no more testimony from the applicant or the appellant, but we would leave the record open for 1 week for new, 1 week for rebuttal, and then 1 week for the applicant's final word, correct?
That's correct. I do note that November 11th would be Veterans Day, and so our office is closed, but we can, of course, have accept it by email.
Okay. So do we need to process-wise, do we need to go back, or can we just go ahead and state that we're going to keep the record open for 3 weeks?
And would we be setting this over to the 18th, or to the following week would be Thanksgiving? And I know we have a different schedule in the month of November for formal sessions. So we may need to pick a date that is some point, the next available formal session after 3 weeks.
Which Ken are you asking?
Either, but primarily,
Yeah, I think the first week would be the 4th, second week, 11th, the third week, the 18th. And then is there going to be a joint hearing on Tuesday, the 23rd?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
There isn't a meeting on the 18th, is there, Ken? Because we've rescheduled that due to AOC, right?
So now you're asking this, Ken.
I am.
Okay. All right.
Administrator Huffer.
Thank you. Yeah, because we don't have a session scheduled because of holidays and AOC conference. I'm looking
We
at
have a
my,
hearing on the 22nd, which is Tuesday. I mean, we have a formal, informal on the 22nd, which is Monday, and
That's
that's that
correct.
additional.
so
Yeah.
November 9th is, we have one on November 9th and we also have one on November 22nd. Otherwise, it won't be until December 2nd. I think I have my dates put together.
Chair.
You want me to lay out what I think would be the schedule?
Hey, thank
Yeah,
you,
Ken,
Mr. Friday. Yes,
should we
go ahead.
reopen the hearing and let you do that in the hearing?
All right, so what I'm going to do is reopen the hearing, and at the point of recommendations for process for continuing this and leaving the record open for Mr. Friday.
And I'll just state for the record, thank you, Zoom, for creating this relatively unique issue for us, where apparently we had a member in the audience who had raised their hand with the intent to ask that the record be kept open while the hearing was still open. That was not acknowledged until after the hearing had been closed and deliberations had begun. So we're going back, we're reopening the hearing to be able to address the request that we had. And so, yeah, Planning Director, if you want to take it from here.
Thank you.
The record shall be open till 5 p.m. on November 4th, 2021 for all parties to submit written testimony or evidence to the Planning Department at 525 Northeast 4th Street, McMinnville. The record shall then be open till 5 p.m. November 11th for all parties to submit to the Planning Department written rebuttal to what was submitted during the first open record period. The record shall then be open for the applicant only to submit final written argument with no new evidence until 5 p.m. on November 18th, 2021. And at that point, the record shall be closed. The Board of Commissioners shall then reopen the hearing at 10 a.m. Monday, November 22nd in room 32 or online of the Yamhill County Courthouse at the point of staff recommendation. And the only reason I mentioned staff recommendation is just because in case any testimony comes in that changes my recommendation.
Thank you for that. Okay, so have we done it?
I would move that we approve the continuance or the leaving the record open. Don't we need to have a motion for that?
I don't think we do. I think it's just.
Oh, we
that
don't
there's
need to,
been a
okay.
request, so we'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah, the request has been made. So at this point, the board would need to recess the hearing and state on the record that the hearing will be reopened as Director Friday has said at 10 a.m. on November 22nd.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and we will recess this public hearing and we will come back at the point of staff recommendation on November 22nd. Okay. All righty.
And then Chair, I'm not trying to
Right,
be.
thank you.
I think you
But
should vote on that, right? I think
Yeah.
need to
You
vote
wanna-
and say that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
and
we-
I just wanted to note, Chair, that Commissioner Burschauer had unmuted herself and was about to say something about 2 minutes ago.
Okay,
It's
well,
okay.
before we do, okay, go ahead, and then we'll go ahead and we'll actually do the motion.
Thank you. No, when we were talking about dates, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't pushing into December because there are financial implications to the applicant. So I wanted to be sensitive to that. So I'm fine with November 22nd. Thank you.
Okay, good point. Okay, Commissioner Kula, did you want to make that motion?
I move that we continue this hearing to the date certain as set by Director Friday.
Okay, we have a motion, further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, thank you, everybody, as we wade through this process. I
Thank you,
appreciate.
Commissioners. Thank you, Ken Friday and Ken Huffer.
Yes, thank you for that. Apologize for the confusion. So we'll go ahead and we'll reopen formal and at the point of announcements. Commissioners,
Chair, I just have a couple of really quick ones.
okay?
Okay, I want to congratulate Steve Kindle from Public Works on an amazing run at Public Works as the vegetation management specialist there. it was a great retirement party, and I'm so glad for his work here at the county. So thank you. I also wanted to extend a thank you to County Administrator, County Council, HR, and Director Manfred for all the work around the vaccine mandate rollout. I know that they did a lot of work, and I'm grateful to all of it. So I have other things, but those are the ones I want to make sure we get out.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that you have all seemingly failed to wear purple today, which is what our district attorney requested of us, Brad Berry. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and he, in honor of that, he said we must wear purple on Thursdays. So I know it's seen purple.
He didn't grab me.
Are you wearing purple? I can't tell. Is that purple?
Yes. But in all seriousness, he is a very strong advocate for domestic violence intervention and protecting individuals in our county. So we thank him for that. I wanted to give Public Works a shout out because during this bomb cyclone, apparently there was an issue with CUNY Road. And so they were all out there, I think it was last Friday morning, dealing with some muddy, watery mess that happened there. So thank you for that. We all attended the HBA legislative update last week, and they had a wonderful announcement that the Street of Dreams for this year will be in Newburgh and perhaps in a couple of other smaller locations, but the center of the event will be in Newburgh. So that's very exciting, and there's a lot of tourism and transitory activity that comes in to see this street and the homes and everything. So that'll be great for our local economy. And then briefly, we all attended the Family Place grand opening of Wilhelmina's Relief Nursery, and it's wonderful to see that go up so quickly. But also with their expansion efforts in Newburgh, they will effectively double the Relief Nursery capacity for the entire county just with those two expansions. So wonderful work that they're doing there, and we thank them for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that the folks who've been involved in that process might quarrel with your thinking it went up easily and quickly, because that was really a tough one, but I have to give credit to Lutheran and Jordan Robinson and Joy Bailey and Dave Hageberg and all the folks who have really had a vision for this, that no matter what, they were not about to let any kind of impediment stop them. So yeah, it was a very exciting day.
And
also,
you too, Chair. I just want to add you to the list.
Well, we were trying to
add yourself to that list, but you should
lobby for us continuing to support that. So yeah, it was a happy day to see that. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, did anybody else have anything that they wanted to share?
Christian probably has a Timbers goal from yesterday to talk about.
And I saw his eyes dart to his chart, and that's when I decided it might be best that we adjourn.
Well, since you mentioned that, Commissioner Cooley, I encourage all of you to Google Dairon Aspria bicycle kick Timbers. Quite something. I can help you spell Dairon Aspria if you need help with that too. So
yeah, we'll be. I'll stop by after the meeting and we'll get that. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And we're adjourned.
Thank you.